Hello, I'm your host Jim McClean. Welcome back to another episode of the Banterflix Movie Review Show here on NvTv. Let's see what movies we'll be talking about tonight. We'll be reviewing Superman, the Christopher Reeve story, which is out in cinemas now. Our pick of the streams is music by John Williams on Disney+. And we'll wrap up with our DVD of the week, The Rosemary's Baby prequel, Apartment 7A. So that's what we've lined up for you this week. Joining me in the studio here in Belfast is Richard Davis.
Hello.
And Tim Burton.
Hello.
Hello to you both, gentlemen. We have a packed show this week. And Tim, since we have you on the show, we always start with a little bit of movie news. This week, of course, we heard the sad news, the passing of Quincy Jones. And you have a huge passion for music and music and cinema. So I just thought it would be right that we ask you a little bit just to share your thoughts on the passing of Quincy Jones.
Well, look, yeah, it would be remiss of us not to mention it. Yeah, Quincy Jones, what a legacy. And when you think back to the history and significance he's made to film, you know, Norman Jewison's In the Heat of the Night, an incredible score, so jazzy, so funky. The Italian Job was soon after, and that cemented a friendship with him and Michael Caine. And they had so much friendship together. They did a big live event, actually, at the Royal Albert Hall in about 2010, I think it was, an evening with Michael Caine for like a big charity event, and Quincy Jones flew all the way over, and he conducted, you know, some of his score from The Italian Job. Wonderful night, and he's not just a producer, because we know of obviously the Michael Jackson and the Frank Sinatra collaborations. He was really a classically trained musician. You know, he lent his talent to so much music of all different genres, and The Color Purple being quite, I suppose, his most famous film segment because of the Steven Spielberg, Whoopi Goldberg connection. Quincy Jones, I think, had the rights to the film, so it was kind of this artistic marriage that only felt fit, and he really wanted to write the music, and he got all these, you know, legendary musicians to help write this very bluesy score, which was nominated for Oscars and everything. So Quincy Jones, thankfully, we've got a great legacy of his music we can quite easily find in various formats. You know? Without
a doubt, and you've mentioned Steven Spielberg. More on him later we will be discussing, surely. Richard, I know you've been busy. You've been a few Belfast Film Festival events. You were at the opening night. You want to share your thoughts on that?
Yeah, of course. Belfast Film Festival is on right now at the moment. Opening night was Halloween night, and then rather appropriately, Freywacka was the opening night film. Highly anticipated. I really liked the film. It's got a little bit of The Wicker Man, a little bit of The Witch, but still very like Irish folk horror. And this is a very music-themed episode. Love the score from D. Hexon, and the cinematography just made the film feel like so much bigger than maybe the budget was, and great performances in it. So look forward to that coming out in cinemas, hopefully in the not too distant future. And yeah, it's a great festival. Look forward to it every year, and there's a lot more coming up. Wise Guy is the closing night film from Out of Orbit as well. So there's a lot of highlights. It's just packing them all in.
Yeah, without a doubt. We always talk about every year. It's that difficult balance of trying to find everything to go and see. And Tim, you have your own event you want to give a mention to just before we kind of get stuck into the other movies. Tell us a little bit about it.
Well, yeah, not to steal thunder, because it's actually the day after the closing festival film, so we'd never want to do that. No, on Sunday the 10th of November, we're going to present at the Strand Arts Centre's very cute boutique pop-up in Connswater. We're going to present music by John Williams, you know, the new documentary by Laurent Bouzeroux. This is a documentary filmmaker who has done some great work. He did the Finding Ford, Harrison Ford documentary last year. He's also done a documentary on Natalie Wood. And also he was like I suppose the EPK go-to guy who did all the behind-the-scenes documentaries for the Spielberg films throughout the Laserdisc, DVD era, you know, going back as far as that. And also Hitchcock. He did all those wonderful Hitchcock documentaries on the various releases that have happened, you know, throughout the decades. So this film really shines a spotlight on John Williams' career, and it's really the first documentary of its kind because he's a very private man. You know, his music we all know, you know, he has scored our lives, you know, from a certain age, certainly from the 70s onwards. but we don't know much about him and his family and his history, so it does give us a unique window into that world. And obviously we have lots of sound bites from Spielberg, lots of very unique scoring session footage which Spielberg himself shot on his little Super 8 or Super 16 camera. So some of that is suitably grainy, but it's as a slice of history, it's great to see. Way back, like Jaws, Close Encounters, stuff which you wouldn't have a film crew filming like you would these days. So it's perfect to have this film presented in the Strand to an audience in this kind of communal setting, because music generates this kind of world togetherness and communication. Is just there's no language barriers, and that's what's so great about music. And we have Laurent Bouzerou's done a nice video introduction for us. Which is lovely. He did it from LA, so we've got a video intro via Zoom. So that'll be nice, just to add a kind of personal touch for the Belfast audience. So it's 2 p.m. Shameless plug. 2 p.m. at the Strand's pop-up in Connswater on Sunday the 10th of November. So this coming Sunday.
Tim, you can be as shameless as you want. There is no rules and regulations here. And I know you've mentioned that documentary. We're going to be discussing that a bit later on. So yes, if you'll be able to watch it at home, but why would you watch it at home when you could go to the Strand's pop-up at the Connswater? But I think we'll move on and chat about something we have seen.
Everybody's looking for a hero. I am not a hero. That was a part. I played the part. I'm not that man.
Hands down, he was Superman from day one.
I realized that if I could pull off this part, it would change my life.
John Houseman said, Mr. Reeve, it is very important to become a serious classical actor. Unless, of course, they offer you a load of money to do something else.
He convinced me when I first met him that he would fly.
Doing things with my dad, it was all about activity and action. Riding bikes, playing soccer, skiing.
Carpe diem, Al!
My dad was very competitive, and he didn't necessarily slow down.
We said goodbye, and he gave this wave. That was the last time I saw him on his feet.
Mr. Reeve currently has no movement or spontaneous respiration.
Superman, crazy. Just that simple little thing over the horse.
I'd ruined my life and everybody else's. I won't be able to ski, sail, throw a ball to Will. Won't be able to make love to Dana. Maybe we should let me go.
She came flying in, and she just yelled, "I love you. I love you."
And then she said the words that saved my life. You're still you.
So that's a look at Superman, Christopher Reeve's story. It's out in cinemas now. Richard, I'll come to you first. I mean, this documentary, when I first heard about this, I did think this would end up on a streaming platform. It may well be. I'm delighted to see it getting cinematically released, being the chance to see it in the big screen. As I was saying before we started to record, I watched this just the other day in the cinema. There's myself and two other people in the cinema, and afterwards I just wanted to give one of the other persons there a big hug, because he definitely was left in a bit of an emotional state after watching this. It tells the story of Christopher Reeves. We know him as Superman. Many will know of the horse riding accident that unfortunately left him paralysed, but there's a lot more in here about the man himself. What did you think of the documentary?
I thought it was really, really good. It is upsetting, but it's also really beautiful and really inspiring, I think. And it is Christopher Reeve's story, but it's so many more people's stories. There's great stories in this film. It's Dana Reeve's story. It's a whole family story. I really liked how the filmmakers did a great job of telling a more modern family story. So Christopher Reeve and Dana have a son, but then Christopher Reeve has two children from a previous relationship. And you know, they're all kind of one big family, and I think, you know, his accident obviously had a terrible impact on the family, but it actually like solidified the family in a really moving way as well. and his children are at the forefront of the documentary, and they're just such a credit to him and you know, both their parents. Loved all the clips in this. Could have just been a movie called, like they could do another movie, another documentary that's Robin and Christopher. Loved the whole story of like Christopher Reeve and Robin Williams' relationship, long-time friendship. The Superman clips and the clips from all his movies were great, but just all the home video and the personal photographs and everything, like there's so much in this film. It's packed with like stories and moments. Love Christopher Reeve, just this little moment where he's in his motorized wheelchair and he's like walking his dog. There's just lovely little moments and so much laughter, like even after his accident, like there's so much laughter. And yeah, it's really touching, great documentary. I recommend people to see.
Yeah, like you, I would recommend this. It reminded me a lot of the Michael J. Fox documentary that was out either early this year or last year. I think it was last year because it was my film of the year. Still, which I thought was fantastic in that sense. It was very personal, but it never felt intrusive. As you've mentioned, there's the use of clips from his big screen appearances, and I quite like how they use, there's certain times they use sequences from, or scenes from Superman, and then there's sequences from Reeve's own personal life, and they kind of use that kind of to effect. I know we're going to touch in just a minute, I know you've already mentioned John Williams from the opening bars, the documentary, where they use that John Williams score. I know next year we have a new Man of Steel hitting the big screen, but for me, Christopher Reeves is Superman. So yeah, well worth a watch. Yes, it is emotional, but uplifting, like the old phrase, the happy sad motif. Tim, what about you? Where are you weighing in on this documentary?
Well, look, to echo both of you, I mean, certainly if you think about the Robin Williams connection, yes, I wonder where they were roommates at, you know, the Juilliard School of Drama, wasn't it? You know, and so that was fascinating, and the fact, and it makes it extra, I suppose, powerful, the fact that they both had their inner demons, but in very different ways. You know, we know Robin Williams had, you know, mental health issues. Christopher Reeve, obviously, we know he had physical issues, so that's extra poignant. But then, as you say, about the actual personal footage is golden. You know, the home video footage, because a lot of us really haven't seen into that very personal since the accident happened. In addition to, yes, some of the early footage of him, I think apparently it must have been a joy for the kids to see that. So it's Matthew, Will, and Alexandra, and I think the three of them have really documented this beautifully, because essentially, yes, of course, it's a love letter to their father, but it's also, it's a great example of, you know, the triumph of the human spirit, because I mean, he overcame such terrible odds. I mean, even the cost of, you know, the healthcare, like, wow, you know, it's like mortgage-inducing costs of healthcare, and actually, it was so emotional whenever his wife says, you know, you're still you, and that was, I think that's the phrase that saved him, wasn't it? That's what he said, you know, because through all of that torture and you know, the accident, the equestrian competition he took part in, you know, where it happened, through all that, you know, he was still him, and the fact that he, at the Academy Awards in 1996, whenever he said, the fact he can still, you know, he could be so humorous about it, and he said, like, it took me almost a year to get here, you know, that it just speaks volumes of the man's integrity, you know. Yeah. So sad. I mean, you know, what happened, but what a great to have this documented, this documentary.
Yeah, without a doubt. Because when that footage came up, I remember that appearance when he was on the Academy Awards.
It was so sad. Yeah.
I do remember that appearance, and like you've both mentioned, as much as it is his story, it's a story of a family, it's a love story of the family dynamic, much like the Michael J. Fox documentary. And just like you mentioned, Tim, my one criticism of the Michael J. Fox documentary on Apple Plus was that it never really discussed the costs for healthcare and the cost that this care ensues. They do touch on this documentary, and it is, you know, you get surprised at the figures, but yeah, absolutely fab documentary. Would recommend seeking it out. It is still in cinemas. I know it's a limited release, so you may have to seek it out, but we're going to move from that, but we're going to stay on a Superman-esque theme as we go to this week's Pick the Streams.
greatest way to demonstrate how much music affects movies. Play it absolutely with no music at all. And then go back and do the whole scene again with all the cues. And you'll recognize the absolute brilliance of John Williams.
The minute John raises his baton and plays the first theme, you just go, oh my God, here's another one.
Star Wars basically would not be Star Wars without Johnny Williams' music.
People say, how do you do so much work? I was filled with the love of music and the pleasure of doing it with great musicians.
After he does music for my movie, I start to see my movie in his way.
The first thing I played for Stephen on this piano was this. And I played that for him, and he said, what is that? You know, what are you going to do with it?
So that's a look at music by John Williams. It's streaming now on Disney+, and of course it will also be screening at the Strand on Sunday the 10th of November. But Richard, I know Tim, we'll come back to Tim. Tim is screening the film. We will come back to him in a minute. But for this documentary that showcases the talent that is John Williams, that I guess we've all grew up with, knowing from various scores, from various generations, from Jaws, Superman, as we've mentioned in the previous review, to Star Wars, even more recently, likes of Harry Potter, even more recent scores as well. I thought this was a fab documentary in the sense that just sitting down and being able to hear from someone about his process and just showcasing his talent and the talking heads that's assembled within this piece. It's a treat. I really liked it. What about you?
Yeah, I really liked this film as well. John Williams, we're all fans, I'm sure, already. And we might have thought we knew his career, but like I didn't know half of, you know, his career, especially how he got started and, you know, how much he's done. I didn't know like about his family background in music. His dad was a drummer, played on soundtracks on some films that got him kind of started in a studio, and then John Williams himself played piano on some Golden Age Hollywood studio films. So like, I mean, I already thought John Williams is cinema, but like now I'm like, well, he absolutely is. Like, he almost defines it more than any director or like anyone, any other like massive figure like Spielberg. Like John Williams' career is just incredible, and I think the film gives you a real appreciation of all the work that he's done and how methodical he is and just the process, and it was just kind of mind-blowing in a way. Touches a bit on his family life. I didn't realize a lot of things. Like there's a bit of tragedy in his life, and you know, that he's still quite a private person, but you know, they say don't meet your heroes, but I think you're very safe meeting John Williams. He just seemed like a terrific person, and loved the documentary. Great revisiting his music and hearing some new music as well. Like, yeah, I think it's a fantastic piece of work as well. So two out of 2.
Yeah, 2 out of 2. We're not getting much confrontation this week. We're all agreeing on everything, so it's going to be interesting. We come to our final film. I agree pretty much with everything you say. I think it's a love letter not just to his work and his talent, to the golden age of Hollywood, but it also touches a bit on where the industry is now. There's references to AI, working on the kind of, he talks about his peers now working in the industry now and how they operate and how he prefers to operate. So yeah, there's a lot there, and like you touched on, Richard, there's film scores that I forget. Maybe it's just me, I'm getting to that difficult age in life where I forget that John Williams was involved, like Born on the 4th of July. I don't think of that as being a John Williams score, but when they play it briefly within the documentary, of course it's a John Williams score. Of course it is, it sounds like that, but the main thrust, as we mentioned earlier on, was Steven Spielberg. There's a lot of that, a lot of interviews with him, the likes of Ron Howard as well. Yeah, just great, particularly talking about their early collaborations, the Jaws, kind of where Spielberg had one idea for a score, what it would be. Williams had a different idea, and the talks of when they first when he first played that tune that we know, the theme for Jaws that we know so well now, when he first played it on the piano. So yeah, it's 2 for 2, me as well. Tim, I'm going to guess, I'm not going to shock our viewers here. As we've mentioned, you're screening this documentary, so for those who don't have Disney+, they should head to the Strand on Sunday the 10th of November, because I'm guessing you're going to make this documentary and this discussion about this documentary 3 for 3.
Without a doubt, yes. Yeah, there's no surprise there. And I think one of the fascinating aspects of this as well is that if you look at the kind of timeline, you know, there's these touchstone moments. You know, in every generation he's created this, I suppose, magical music and appreciation of the craft, appreciation of music and the sound of an orchestra, because so many people were introduced to an orchestra thanks to his writing, whether it be the Star Wars in the 70s. In the 80s, you'd have Indiana Jones, E.T. The 90s was Jurassic Park, Schindler's List. And I think some of those Schindler's List segments were lovely. I mean, very emotional. And of course, Harry Potter and Christopher Columbus was reciting how whenever he first heard the theme, it is very melodic, Hedwig's theme, but then it finishes a bit darker, knowing that dark things are going to come, because obviously Williams actually, it isn't mentioned in the documentary, but as a little kind of nugget, Williams read the Harry Potter books to his grandkids, and so he did know the world quite well. So it was a kind of a simple yes whenever he was offered to score those first 3 films. So no, it's a very special documentary, which, yes, I think anyone who appreciates the arts and music, you don't have to be a die-hard fan to enjoy it.
So I think with that we shall move on and wrap up this week's show with our DVD of the week.
You know, when we found you...
Whoa!
You lost, honey? You were kind of a mess.
We want to help.
The place is yours if you want it.
Terry, you don't even know these people.
Look, moving into my own place feels like a first step. I think this belonged to your old tenant.
She skipped out of here like Cinderella at midnight.
All I want is to dance.
Show me. Again.
Being on stage isn't worth this.
What's the holdup, dear?
Can you just leave, please?
So that's a look at Apartment 7A. It's available now on DVD and Blu-ray, but we should also say you can stream it on Paramount Plus. That's where I was able to watch it, but I thought, as we are this season, we are championing physical media. And I know spooky season is behind us, but I thought we'd talk about this movie. So a prequel of sorts, pseudo-prequel to Rosemary's Baby. This time we have Terry, a dancer, who finds herself, shall we say, at the very opening of the film, she suffers an injury on stage, trying to pursue her dream, and unfortunately her path ends up in the way of the Cassavetes. So Richard, I'll start with you again, as I have seemingly all this evening. Come to you first. Were you a fan of this film?
I think I thought it was maybe all right. You know, Rosemary's Baby is a great film, and it's hard to live up to that. Interesting concept, going back and doing something that, well, essentially is kind of a prequel. I thought like it might have been more interesting just to look at like that apartment building and the building almost as like this, you know, recess of different stories. This feels kind of like a retread of the original, but for me it doesn't have nearly any of the atmosphere. Like the atmosphere of like Rosemary's Baby is incredible, and it really puts you in Mia Farrow's shoes, like psychologically, like it's a very subjective film. And I just didn't feel like this captured that or got near that kind of level of immersion for the audience. Quite liked the people in it. Loved Diane West in the Ruth Gordon role. Thought she was great. But yeah, for me, it didn't, like, if it gets people to watch the original, I think that's great. That's a positive. But I would say if you have a choice of either film and you haven't seen Rosemary's Baby, watch Rosemary's Baby.
And don't forget, Richard, you've got the straight to TV sequel to Rosemary's Baby as well. For those of you who really want to go down a deep dive, I thought this was fine. It comes in the back of a year. We've seen a lot of these pregnancy horror. I think the last time we had you on the show, Tim, we were talking about The First Omen. I don't think it's quite as stylish as that. I was never bored when I watched it. I just thought it was fine, serviceable. Everything you've said, Richard, in that sense, that it doesn't really hold a candle to the original. I am a fan of the director. She directed Relic, which was out a few years ago, that kind of dealt with dementia and used that kind of a scope of kind of exploring within horror. She knows what she's doing there. There are some striking sequences in it. I think it's an interesting character that we have in Terry, who we do see in the original Rosemary's Baby, to try and flesh out her character. The disappointing thing, as you alluded to, Richard, is that they flesh out her character in a very similar path to Mia Farrow in Rosemary's Baby. So there's not a lot there. It's not a requel or legacy sequel in that sense, of course, because it's a prequel. But it is just rehashing a lot of the ideas from the original, and yeah, it's fine. I come back to a point, I don't think people will be bored by it, but I just think of those type of films, because I remember, Tim, I think we were all quite positive about The First Omen when it was released earlier in the year. So it's going to be interesting. Are you going to make this a wave of positivity to finish the show, or were you coming down on apartment 7A?
Well, I mean, but I think it's okay. I mean, I wouldn't kind of slate it, but yeah. I mean, I think some of the, the kind of jump scares were a bit daft, because I'm not sure, and the creature wasn't very, I don't know, it wasn't very convincing, but. You have, I mean, it's set in 1965, so I liked how the era was painted, with that kind of cinematography. It was all very nice and kind of brown and autumnal, I suppose. But there was just something about the, I suppose, the pace of the film. You kind of know what's going to happen, so there aren't really any surprises. So I think the jump scares are there just to surprise us, maybe, and some of the, obviously, the injury she has to endure. I mean, that's rough to watch, but essentially, because you know how it's going to end, there isn't really much to get your teeth into. But that's what I'm saying. I mean, it's not terrible. It's just you kind of, I don't know. You do end up feeling, just give or take it. You don't really. I mean, I would have no urge to see it again, to be honest.
You've just preempted my question, Tim. I get a sense you're not going to be rushing to rewatch this, I guess. And you mentioned this, Tim, just in passing, the fact that it's an inherent problem with prequels, and this type of prequel where it's so tied to the original Rosemary's Baby. If you've seen that film, read the book, you know Terry's fate. In that sense, she's a small but significant role within the original film, so you know her fate. So I guess and it's that problem, you've got to make that journey interesting. And as Richard mentioned, you essentially just redress it up as a kind of rehash of Rosemary's Baby. Look, it's fine. I guess of the three films, we've been lukewarm about it. We've been very glowingly positive about our previous two films this evening. So on that note, all that's really left for me to do now is thank my two guests. So thank you very much, Richard.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tim.
Great, thanks.
Thank you very much for watching at home. We'll be back next week with another episode. But for now, until then, goodbye.